Are you ready to make big money with a little tiny audience? Well, as promised, I brought Ina to the show, who is teaching you how to monetize a tiny audience, because it's all about getting clients first and doing it with passion, without the overwhelm and without all the icky, yucky, just grossness that comes with sales. She is one of my favorite people to learn from and the one that gave me hope for a small audience. So are you ready? Let's go. Welcome to the Cure for Pod Fade. I am so excited you found your way here, because that means you know how powerful podcasting can be. You are ready to build a legacy with your unique story, your message, and your offer, but you're getting a little overwhelmed. You're feeling frustrated, you're feeling stuck. You just don't know how to grow your show, find a new audience, and make some money. Podcasting can be the ticket to the life of your dreams, and it doesn't have to be as hard as you think. We're talking about all the ingredients it takes to be a successful, profitable podcaster without that icky overwhelm, because you are too magical to join the 85% plus club that pod fades away. I'm your host, Jen Dragonette, so let's make podcasting easy peasy lemon squeezy. Oh, welcome to the podcast, Ina. I am so flippin' excited, first off. I've had a lot of guests that I'm really excited about, but I think that you have the true cure for pod fade, and this conversation is going to be beautiful.
Amazing. I can't wait. Thank you so much for having me, Jen. This is a true honor. I've been so looking forward to this, so thank you for having me.
Oh, yes. So why I believe, and one of your missions, you are a cure for pod fade, is that you focus on, it doesn't matter about the size of your audience, that we can make an impact, make income with a tiny audience. So I want to know, in your journey, how did you put your blinders on? Because in podcasting, it's a slow growth. So how'd you put your blinders on in the beginning and say, okay, I look at these gurus that are like, build an audience. I'm not doing it that way.
Well, it took, I wish I had been that enlightened and that smart to ignore everybody and just march to the beat of my own drum. But it wasn't like that. I started out pretty much listening to exactly the same advice that everybody's listening to. The only difference between me and everybody else who just gives up is that I had to make this work, right? I was starting a coaching business that I didn't even know it was going to be a coaching business in the beginning. I quit my job in 2018, and I thought this was like my very primitive mind, right? Like entering this universe of coaching. I thought, I'm smart. I'm smarter than everybody else. Everybody else can go out there and get clients. I don't need clients. You know what I need? I just need to put out an awesome course and just let it sell itself in autopilot, and then I'll be rich overnight, and my husband can retire from his job, and we can live by the beach, and like it's a permanent paid vacation, right? Turns out that it doesn't really work like that. And it took me really like spending 6 months creating this amazing online course, right? That was going to be like my salvation. I went and I created it. I put it out there. I sold 4 copies, all discounted, and I never talked about it again. I was like, that didn't work. What am I supposed to do now? And a very smart person came and told me. I was actually on a sales call with this person, and at the time their packages were like $7,000 for 6 months or something. And I did not have that kind of money lying around, but we were having a nice conversation, and I told her, like, listen, I can't do that. I'm sorry, like I just can't. And she's like, I'm just going to give you this advice for free because I feel like somebody needs to tell you this. You're going about it all wrong. You really need to start helping people. And I'm like, I do? Really? Is that a yes? She's like, yeah, start getting clients. It's like, just go and do it. And I'm like, okay, but I need to grow my audience. Same thing. I need to grow my audience. Without a big audience, I'm not going anywhere. So I kept investing in all of these programs, putting all of my money and all my, like every penny that I was making, I would just turn around and put it into some kind of audience growth scheme. But in the meantime, I had to get clients. So I started getting clients, and it took me a few years. It took me 3 years to figure out that I was actually making money in my business. I was actually getting clients, but I wasn't keeping any of it because I kept pouring it into all these audience growth gimmicks, right? And my audience wasn't growing. So here I am realizing this, that I'm just making, like, I've been making this mistake for 3 years and I consider myself to be smart, and where am I going wrong? Then I'm like, you know what? Why don't I teach people the thing that I know how to do, which is to get clients even if they have a small audience. And even then, it took me an entire, 10 months to come up with that branding for it, because I kept calling it something else. Like, let's see what sticks. And this was like all that experimentation until finally it's like, yes, I can teach you how to get clients even with a small audience. And that translated into podcasting too, because most podcasts don't have a big audience. Most podcasts only have up to 100 downloads per episode. And that is okay. I want everybody who can hear me, that is okay. It's totally all right. It doesn't have any impact on the how many clients you get. Of course, if you had 10,000 downloads per episode, I'm sure some things would be easier, but right now you don't. And you don't have control over that. So what can you control is everything that you do with the community that is already there. To answer your question in a very long-winded fashion, I really wish I had been that enlightened on day one. It would have saved me a lot of money. It would have saved me a lot of time, effort, energy, and I would not be in the amount of debt that I found myself in if I had figured out that I can just monetize the audience that I already have.
Yeah. And I have to say that you sharing your story and your message it gave me permission, because my original show, we were stuck at 60 downloads and I was like, what the heck is going on?
Right.
But then I realized it was one of your episodes. It dawned on me. It just clicked. It was like, but 90% of my income is coming from that show. And I was like, oh, am I wealthy? No. But am I comfortable because of that show? Yes. It's okay.
That's amazing.
And it was your episode that made it okay for me to stop trying to seek that validation in the number.
Yeah. Because that's really what it is. In fact, I crossed the 6-figure mark in my business without even knowing that I did, because that's not what I was measuring. What I was measuring is how many followers I have. So I kept telling myself that I'm not successful because my audience is still small. What do I have to show for it if I can't go to Jen's podcast and say, hey, I'm getting 10,000 downloads per episode, right? What am I worth? It took a while really to figure all that stuff. So I'm so glad that I helped in some way, shape, or form for you to realize that, wait a minute, I am actually making money. So what is the problem that I'm trying to solve here? So the way that I teach this stuff is, it's not like I'm saying, hey, everybody needs to stop growing their audience immediately, right? Is that there is a time and place for audience growth in your business. And you can start by getting clients, because the way that I illustrate it to all of my clients is, what if I gave you 10,000 followers tomorrow? How would you feel about that? And most of them, 99% of them, come back and say, I'd be stressed out. What am I supposed to do with that? How do I keep their attention? Did they come for the right thing? Did one of my reels go viral, and was that the right kind of reel, right? Or the right kind of TikTok to go viral at that time? Did it really attract the right kind of clients? There's so many questions that come from that. It's not very clear cut. It's not just simple. It's not just grow your audience and you're all set. It's is it the right audience? So when you start to prioritize monetizing now, it gets you into that experimentation mode. Okay, who am I supposed to be serving? What am I supposed to be giving them? And you can practice and do that first. Because once you get that right, once you know that what you have is what people need, then audience growth becomes just a cash generating game, right? Because the more eyeballs you get into an offer that you know that already works, then the more money you're going to make. But until you get to that point, then the number is just a number.
Yeah. And I know there's probably a point where the number was small on both sides, the follower count and the revenue count. What did you use as a metric or as a motivation to say, okay, I have small both, but I know it can be better?
That's a really good question. So what keeps you motivated when things are legit not working in either way? I hate to sound like everybody else, but it's just having a really strong vision for where you want to go. So it became really obvious to me that whatever I could see other people do, like a kind of success that they could have, the amount that they were charging per client, their revenue goals for the month, I'm like, if it's possible for them, it's gotta be possible for me. I just have to figure it out. So in the meantime, I do tell my people, you guys, make sure that you have some kind of funding. Make sure you are getting money from some other place. Don't quit your job yet, right? If your husband is the one paying the bills right now, let them do that for a little bit while you figure this out, because this is not a get rich quick scheme. You can't think about it that way. I remember in my first year, I was following all of these coaches that were really trying to get you to rush to make $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month. They're like, hey, if you take my masterclass and you take my program, you'll start making 10K months, right? Like that was the buzzword back in 2018. It was like, 10K months. We gotta get to 10K months. And I'm like, okay. So in the first year, I did not make 10K months. So am I a failure? Like, what's going on here? It's like, no, you just gotta realize that all of those people who are making 10K months, ask them how long they've been doing this for. There's very few of them, like 0.001% of population that gets rich quickly, right? And even when they don't know what to do with it and they end up crashing and burning, right? Case in point, people who win the lottery, most of them end up being tragic stories. Why? Because what do you do with that kind of success if you have not built up to it? If you have not prepared yourself for that next stage? What has always kept me motivated, because it's not like I'm like swimming in the dough right now. I am not a 7-figure business. I'm a 6-figure business, right? So I am still in experimentation mode. Every time that I do a launch, okay, did that work? Did it not work? Why did it not work? Let's try something else. Let's try this next time and see how it goes. Okay, how soon can we try that? So everything is experimentation, which kind of takes me to a very, very important point here. I love what I do. If I didn't like going live, coming and talking to you on this podcast, if I didn't like doing my own podcast, if I didn't like creating community, I would be miserable all day long, because I'm just waiting for a result that is going to take a long time to arrive. So what am I doing with my life? It would be miserable. So I'm hoping this is hitting with someone out there. Like, if you're doing things that you really don't like because you think that one day it will flip a switch and you won't have to do those things anymore because you're so rich, like you're in for a rude awakening here. The marketing stuff, this is the fun stuff. This is something you're going to have to do forever in your business, is marketing your products, is talking about your offers. So you got to have a certain level of passion for it, right? If you don't, then where are you going? And what are you doing with your life? You see what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that you do take this like in a very unique approach that I appreciate it, because there's so many things that you bring up on your show or challenges that you do with your community. Like right now you're building a community for your podcast, which I'm like, yes, we need more podcast communities that aren't so post your episode, come to like, you are truly building this piece that I think is beautiful for podcasting, which is community.
Yeah.
And I think that goes with your brand so well. And I think recently you put something out about failure, because you mentioned failure and you mentioned the launches. Yeah. And it rewired how I thought about, okay, it might not have been what you thought, but there was a lesson. Yeah. How can we take this forward?
Yeah. And thank you so much for mentioning that about community. I started literally 2 weeks ago, and you're a member of this community. And by the way, you're killing it in there. I love having you in there every day. You're just a powerhouse. So
about the community too. Don't forget to drop the name casually.
Very casually. I started a new Facebook group. It's called The Global Phenomenon. It's actually the Global Phenomenon Podcast Facebook group. The Global Phenomenon being the name of my podcast, and the Global Phenomenon talks about the online coaching industry. So I interview the top coaches in the world. I've had John Lee Dumas, Laura Belgray, Pat Flynn, like amazing people in the online world have graced me with their presence in the online, in the podcast. And I like to ask them about their true startup story. So if you're on your podcasting app right now, go and subscribe to The Global Phenomenon. You'll see some amazing stories in there. Mm-hmm. And I just realized that I didn't really have a place to talk to my community other than Instagram. And Instagram is great for what I did not coin this term, but it's basically like that. It's like having a cult of personality kind of brand, right? Which is what we see, like the people that we follow that we're obsessed with, we're not necessarily in touch with other people who love those people, right? You see what I mean? There's so many people that I follow that it's a very silo following. It's like I follow them and I love their content, but I'm not necessarily like geeking out over the content with other people who also follow them. Like that, those conversations are not being had. I'm not collaborating with those people. I'm not getting clients from those people. I just don't know who they are because Instagram is a very like one-way street, right? You follow somebody, they build a following and they talk to one to many and many to one, but there isn't that many to many relationship. So once I figured that out, which took me a while, I started this new community and it's literally 2 weeks old at this point. We have about 42 people in there. I was actually super excited that within the first week, we got like 30 people in there. So excited. And I am trying to really educate them on how to be part of a community. Right? Because I'm part of Facebook groups where I don't really interact in there much. Like it, and this is not about fake engagement either. Like I want people to get to know each other. Right now we're doing a scavenger hunt. So it's a whole thing like to launch season 4 of the podcast. I'm looking for the next person to interview on my podcast. So I decided to just do it like a little game until season 4 comes out. But after May 31st, you may be wondering like, okay, what are we going to do in there? We're going to be doing a lot of talking about the online coaching world. We're going to share about our war stories of selling our offers and doing our launches. We're going to be supporting each other. There are so many people who could be just working with each other rather than feeding the machine of somebody else who already has like everything they could absolutely want. We could actually just be supporting each other. So many mindset coaches, so many life coaches, so many business coaches all together, so many podcasting coaches all together. So creating that ecosystem where we're all helping each other out, that's where I want that community to go. So if anybody's interested in joining, I'm sure Jennifer is going to give you, Jennifer, I called you Jennifer. I'm sure Jenny's,
I'm all the above.
I'm sure Jenny's going to give you the link in the show notes, but you can also go to theglobalphenomenon.com/Facebook, and that's theglobalphenomenon.com/Facebook, and just join us and you'll see what we're about. But yeah, that I love it that you're saying that you haven't seen other people do this, because I'm not in for the fake follows, for the loops, what they call loops. It's like, hey, you follow me, I follow you, you follow 5 other people, and then they follow other people, because I'm not in this for the fake audience growth. What good is it to you if 40 people who don't really care about your content start to follow you? What does that do for you? What really works? Collaborations. Finding other coaches who do the same thing as you, who talk to the same audience as you, and figure out how you can put your heads together and share audiences. You guys don't even have to follow each other to help each other out. You see what I mean? So that's the kind of thing that I'm hoping to do more of in the group. Thank you for letting me talk about that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think this is part of the cure, because so many, again, this tiny audience, and then we're alone. Because yeah, we have great interviews, but what happens after the interview? Like, where do we go after? Like, I have tried so hard to create the community off my other show, and I haven't been successful in it because I've been looking for the number. Yeah. I've been looking to grow the community instead of looking to actually connect. I'm like, oh, my community is tiny. Nobody's going to come.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that I truly appreciate about being in your space is it's like walking into a room of 40 people. Holy crap. 40 people show up every day, or show up once a week, or show up like once a month. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And there's absolutely a desire in me to grow that community as big as I can. But just like we were talking about before, if I were to grow by 1,000 new members overnight, that would be very difficult for me to keep up with the load without having created some systems around this, without having creating a cadence, without asking my people, what is it that they want more of? How can I serve them better? So it's a long road, and I'm here for it. I'm here for the slow growth that actually makes a difference, and we'll see where it goes. Everything is an experimentation. So if you're listening right now, I want you to just, if you get anything out of this interview, is adopt that experimental mind. Is try whatever is in your mind right now and just put it out there. So what if it fails miserably? Like, I was at risk of starting a new Facebook community and having nobody there. Why? Because my community was on Instagram. And usually, like, people who are on Instagram, they'll tell you, oh, I hate Facebook. I don't even have a Facebook account, right? I get so many of those. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to start a Facebook group with Instagram people. And that's risky, right? But I just put it out there. Let's see what happens. I'm just going to do my best. And it's all an experiment. So just put it out there and try it and see how it goes.
Yeah. Oh, it's all an experiment. And that's so true, is like testing the waters, testing to figure out things. So I want to know, when you decided, like, because you left your job, you decided to add a podcast in, you got some major players. Like, JLD was your first interview. He was on my wish list for 2 years before I even got brave enough to reach out. I want to know, like, you're experimenting with podcasts, but your podcast is never, like, when I look at it, I don't see it as an experiment. Like, it seems like an success from the beginning, because you have all these big players. And season 4, I'm so excited for all the people that you've name dropped. I'm like, oh, I can't wait. I want to know, how did you start from the beginning before you had a show? Yeah. Getting these big players and having that confidence to show up.
Okay. Number one, not everything that you see is an overnight success, right? So I'm going to tell you right now, I started the Global Phenomenon podcast in October of 2020, right after I had just done 100 episodes on a different podcast, which was called Trailblazing Out of Corporate Life. Okay. So I actually already had a podcast that I was trying to grow, and it wasn't growing, and I wasn't getting great guests for it. It wasn't even a guest kind of show. It was like just me teaching. And then I get to 100 episodes. I mean, any podcaster out there who's like still like churning, they're like, I wish I had 100 episodes, right? I had 100 episodes and I shut down the podcast. And I said, okay, I'm pivoting. I'm not talking to corporate people to get out of corporate anymore. I want to talk to entrepreneurs. I want to rebrand. I want to do this all over again, right? So I want you to know that this podcast, The Global Phenomenon, is my 4th podcast that I've ever started. I actually started podcasting in 2012. And I had a podcast that I'm not going to tell you the name, but whoever finds it, more power to you. And if you find it, send me a DM and tell me that you found it. I don't advertise it. I don't really talk about it, but it's still out there. I haven't taken it down for some reason, like historical purposes, right? It's still out there. But I was interviewing other entrepreneurs locally in Boston, where I live. And I have maybe like 45 episodes on that podcast before I gave it up. Then I had another podcast that I wanted to be more like my life. And that didn't last very long because I had no idea how to monetize it or that it was a business, like total hobby. Then I started Trailblazing Out of Corporate Life when I quit my job in 2018, July 2018. I was doing a challenge, a 5-day challenge to promote my services. And I said, I can see other people podcasting their challenges. I think I'm just going to do that. So I did that. The first 5 episodes of my Trailblazing Out of Corporate Life podcast were these 5-day challenge. And I just kept it up, 1 episode per week without fail for 100 episodes. And then I pivoted again, right? Experimentation. If you get anything out of this, is that everything was an experiment. Now, when I decided to start a new podcast, I had to really ask myself very serious questions. What is it that I want this podcast to be? What do I want to get out of it? I started this podcast with the full intention of growing it to millions of downloads. We still don't have millions of downloads. Are you kidding me? Right. But I wanted this is it. Like, I'm going to really grow it, which means that I'm going to need excellent guests, right? So it was a very intentional thing. I'm like, I need excellent guests. Now, I'm about to tell you how the secret sauce gets made. Okay? Because you just told me that it took you 2 years to even get up the courage to ask JLD for an interview, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell you the secret sauce here. It's not like I had all of this confidence, okay? I had actually already interviewed JLD back in 2019 for the Trailblazing Out of Corporate Life podcast. Like, I don't know why, but I saw, this is how it happened. I saw another buddy of mine who had a podcast interviewing JLD. So I sent him a message. I'm like, how did you get JLD on your podcast? Back in 2019, okay? How did you get him on? And he's like, oh, I just asked. I'm like, what do you mean you just asked? Like, what do you mean you just asked? Like, you just knocked on his door and said, hey, be on my podcast? And he said, yes. And he's like, yeah, pretty much. I'm like, well, then I'm going to do that too. So back then, 2019, I sent them an email or I went to their website. There's some kind of submission process. And they said yes, because JLD does something that is really nice. And I'm going to say it out loud here so that if anybody's ever in this position to do something as nice as this, you definitely should. JLD sets aside one day a month. Actually, I mean, it's 2023. This was 2019. I don't know if he still does it. He sets a day aside to just be interviewed for 15 minutes by anybody who will have him. So I took, they told me, yeah, sure, just put yourself on the camera. I'm like, what? So I interviewed him for 15 minutes. So I already knew how to get JLD when I decided to start the Global Phenomenon podcast. So when I said to myself, when I started outlining this, I'm like, okay, I need big guests. I already know how to get in with JLD. Let's start asking around. I had met supermodel Emmy. She's a plus size, like the first plus size supermodel in the world. I had met her through a connection here in Boston. And she's actually gone into the coaching space now. So I'm like, hey, let me interview you for the podcast. In fact, we ended up working together. I had made her website. We had a really good relationship. So I interviewed her. She sent me a few other people that actually ended up not making it on the podcast because they ended up not being coaches. Because at the time I didn't know that I just wanted to do coaches. So I interviewed supermodel Emmy. And then I'm here racking up all other interviews with my friends, right? Like Marieli Silvet from Puerto Rico. She's an expert at communications. My friend Jen Hemphill, who is the host of Her Dinero Matters. So I started asking them to be on my podcast. And then I'm sitting on my couch and the podcast hasn't gone live yet. I knew that I wanted to have a bank before I went live. So I'm sitting on my couch and I'm like, it would be awesome to get Pat Flynn. That would be an awesome guest. And this is 2020. So I'm sure that a lot of speaking engagements, a lot of things on Pat Flynn's plate had disappeared, just like everybody else's, because everything was being done indoors. So this was one of those things that it was like the right time, the right place, right? So I go to his website, and there's a speaker form, and it asks you, when do you need him to speak? I'm like, on this date or whatever. How much is your budget for Pat to speak at your event? And I'm like, 0. Next question, right? Like, I don't have any budget. I'm not going to pay anybody to do this. Or but I wrote a story in the description like, hey, I almost met Pat in 2019 and I chickened out and I never said hi. So you know what? This is me making up for it. I would love to have him on my podcast and talk about his story. And I got a response within a week saying, sure, let's do it. Now, to give you, I was going through a program where I had a mentor who teaches people how to grow their podcasts. And when he's the one mentoring me on how to start this podcast. And when he saw that I got Pat Flynn, he's like, you did what? He's like, I haven't been able to get him on. So I introduced them to his people. And I said, hey, my mentor, he's looking for guests and if Pat is available. But by that time, the world had kind of moved on a little bit. His schedule got booked up. He said, we don't have anything until next spring. So it was one of those things that it was like right time, right place. So Pat Flynn ended up being episode number 3. So it's not really about confidence. It's more about, I have nothing to lose. You know what I mean? That I just have absolutely nothing to lose. So I'm just going to shoot my shot. I have applied to interview really the biggest coaches that you can imagine. And I'm in their database. I'm in their podcasting database and they have not gotten back to me, but one day they will. My episode 101, it was with Alex Beaton. She's a coach, amazing. She's in Trinidad and Tobago. And I've worked with her. She's just incredible. Marketing mind, Instagram mind. Right now she's a launch strategist, but back then she was the Instagram girl. She was the Instagram stories girl. It took me 2 years to get her on the podcast, and I finally did. I don't think it's really about confidence. It's about knowing that these things take time, that you have absolutely nothing to lose, and that you just shoot your shot in a very polite way. You never make a guest feel like you're undermining them in any way, right? So I've had a guest that I've been wanting to have forever, and I keep following up in a very polite way. I never say the words, oh, I guess my podcast is too small for you. Or, oh, I guess you don't have time for this right now. Or projecting any assumptions on them. You're always just super nice, super polite, and hopefully one day they'll look at you and be like, hey, Ina has been asking us to be on her podcast for a while. Do we want to do it at some point? Right? So I think you just be nice, you shoot your shot, and you get what you can take. But that's really how the sauce gets made. Has nothing to do with confidence, I don't think.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you shared the story, because from the outside, again, it's that fake lifestyle that you were kind of talking about, like align, like see what's behind. Your episode that just came out today was about that too, is like this alignment piece. If you can't tell, I'm a listener and you need to go check out her show. And of course, everything is in the show notes. We often forget that there's a lead up to this. Like, you've had multiple podcasts before you did this. Mm-hmm. You did just you took a shot in the dark and you kept going. You're launching season 4. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah, I am
because so many
excited.
People give up.
Right. I think that's the biggest danger of starting your podcast. Is not that you're going to put it out there and you're going to fail. Like, failure kind of happens to you. No, failure is what happens when you quit. Failure is what happens when you stop. So you just keep going. Like, that's it. People don't realize the importance of longevity in this business, right? Just the fact that I've been around for a while. I've been around for long enough for you to know who I am, right? If I had quit after the first 30 episodes because I go, this is just too much work and I'm not getting the downloads that I thought, then we would never be here. So it goes back to, you gotta love what you do enough to want to do it, even if you're not getting paid, even if it's not working, as long as you're still experimenting. Like, this is it. This is the journey. This is the life.
So what's your newest experiment?
It's the creating the community for the podcast, right? So I decided, and oh my God, this is going to take us down an entire rabbit hole here. You've heard, and everybody who's a podcaster has heard of Patreon, right? Mm-hmm. Which some people use, and I'm sure you've talked about this, like some people use to monetize the podcast itself. I've never actually tried to monetize my podcast itself. I monetize through my services and driving people into my offers, but I don't have sponsors and I don't have ads for other services. So number one, I'm going to start experimenting with that. I'm going to start experimenting with, like, should I get sponsors? Should I be promoting services or products that I already use and I'm an affiliate for? I'll experiment with that a little bit. But I thought maybe we should just have a Patreon, quote unquote, a Patreon where anybody who wants to support my content can actually go and support it. So I looked into it, and it was like, I was here thinking, I'm just going to charge like $2 per month just to support me and stuff. And Patreon said, no, you need to charge at least $3 because we're going to be taking fees. You want this to be worth it, right? So like, no, do at least $3. I'm like, okay. So I'm here investigating, like, okay, $3. I set up my Patreon. I set up everything. And then I realized that Patreon doesn't have a built-in community feature. This was before I started the Facebook group. I was looking for somebody to pay to be inside the community, to be a TGP, the Global Phenomenon Insider. So when I realized that, like, Patreon is associated with Discord, and I'm like, I don't know Discord. Am I expecting people who are not tech savvy to go and learn a brand new community platform? And like, I mean, I'm having difficulty with Discord. Like, why am I doing this? So I found myself like creating all of these Discord chats and like this. I'm like, what am I doing right now? I already have a way for people to pay me, and I can just direct them to a Facebook group where the email address is required so that they can be part of my list and where they can be part of the community. So that's what I did. I set up a TGP Insider package because I do get a lot of people telling me, Ina, I can't work with you right now, or that is a little bit too expensive for me, but I love everything you do, and any way that I can support you, I will. I'm like, then buy me a coffee, right? 1 coffee per month. Actually, and I did the math. My lowest tier is $9 a month. And I'm like, that's the price of a Starbucks coffee, right? I don't drink coffee. So I'm like, so I finally looked it up. And it turns out that a Starbucks like latte, like with all the fancy stuff, is like almost $5. So I'm like, okay, you're basically taking me out for coffee. You're buying yourself a coffee and you're buying me a coffee for $9 a month. And that's a thank you. So as a thank you back to you, I give you access to the behind the scenes of my business. I have a close friend stories on Instagram that I only share with clients. So I'm like, hey, you want to hear the behind the scenes and all of the nitty gritty that nobody else gets to hear about? Just all you have to do is support the show and I'll let you in and you get to be a part of the community. And we also have an expert tier where you can just come in and my community becomes your community. Come and teach them stuff. Come and do trainings. Come in and create opportunities for people to mingle with each other. That's what I mean with using this community to get clients from it, to get collaborations from it. I want some people to be like legit experts in the group and they can just use it as their own community. So instead of going and building your own, come and join mine, an audience full of online coaches, and come and teach them something new, right? And become an expert in the community. So that's my latest experiment. It literally came to me overnight and I started working on it nonstop and putting it together and now it's ready. So now that's what I go and tell everybody about, that we have now a community of online coaches inside the global phenomenon and people can have a certain status in that community. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. That's my latest experiment.
I'm very excited about it too and joined as an expert because I want what you've built is what I've been trying to build. And one of the things I think that is so unique and that we have to watch when we watch for other coaches is how our minds work differently.
Yeah.
What you came up with, that passion, you just drove it out. And you are so appreciative of every single member in there. Like it is very welcoming. It's so different than other groups that I've been in. That I'm like, yeah, I want to be a founding member. I want to be an expert because everything we've been talking about today leads back to networking and community and collaboration. That's the beauty of podcasting, is that extra level of connection, of collaboration. And I feel like it's one of those spaces that it's not like we're like punching each other out like, oh, they're my competition. They're my competition. It feels like, I call it in our neighborhood. And I've heard other people use it. Like, you're my neighbor. You need extra sugar? I got you. Like, here's my friend so-and-so. Let's have a barbecue. Let's have a block party. And I feel like that's podcasting and you've done the work. You're like, Patreon wasn't it.
Yeah.
I want real community. And I am so grateful to be part of that.
And I thank you so much because you are our very first founding member of this expert tier. And I can't wait. I'm here waiting for you to tell me these are the trainings that I want to do. This is how I want to engage a community. I'm like, yes, I'm here for it. It's going to be amazing. So if anybody wants to join me and join Jen in this community, you have the link, theglobalphenomenon.com/Facebook. Just come and join us because it's going to be a party there. And I love it that you're likening it to being a block party. Like that's how I want it to feel. I want it to feel like we're not here in competition. We're all helping each other out.
Yeah. And I think that's where the magic happens, is when we all help each other. You know, like you said, build the small audience, nurture that small audience. Let's have a block party.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful that you're in there with me.
Me too. So if you were going to add your specific like ingredients into the cure for pod fade, what ingredients would you add?
I am not sure how to call this one, but we do have to put our blinders on when it comes to the growth numbers. I think that there is so much that we can do with the audience that we already have. I wish for everybody to have a big audience eventually at some point when it makes sense. I don't want that to drag you down. So many podcasts, and I heard this statistic at one point that 80% of podcasts get abandoned after the third episode. And the reason that happens is because of this overwhelm, because putting yourself out there and putting your heart on the table and putting all of that work into something that like the world is finally going to hear you, and then they don't come, that can be really disheartening. And it can be really like damaging to your self-confidence, feeling like, oh, I put all of that effort and all of that energy into it and nobody wanted to hear it. So why am I doing this? Why am I going through all of this work if nobody's listening? Right? I get it. So I would say that if we didn't worry about that growth number just yet, if we just focused on that passion that we have for this thing and to realize that the world needs it and that we want to be that podcaster, in 10 years, I want to be who I am now times 10. So if right now I'm doing absolutely nothing, 0 times 10 equals 0. But if I'm doing something right now, even if it's small, you multiply that by 10 and you're left with 10 times the growth, 10 times the impact, 10 times the passion. So I'm not sure what to call this ingredient. It could be like a sprinkle of passion with a sprinkle of not caring about the numbers, with a sprinkle of experimentation. And that's really going to keep your blinders on to worry about what you need to get done right now so you can be where you want to be in 10 years.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. I hope that helps.